Today we are going to be talking about how to get an amazing bass tone when you're playing live. See you in the video.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Toby and James Talk Bass. I'm James from ebassguitar.com and this is top e-bass guitar coach Toby Newcomb. We're talking about how to get a great bass tone live. And this is something players often struggle with. So Toby, what is the secret of getting a great bass tone live?
Well, essentially, James, the secret to getting a fantastic, amazing bass tone is understanding and being able to utilize EQ.
So we're going to talk about what actually is EQ and how to use it on your bass guitar. But before we get going, I've got a quick favor. If you enjoyed this video and you get a ton of value from it and you're not subscribed to the eBass Guitar YouTube channel, please can you hit that red subscribe button which is somewhere around this video. This would mean the absolute world to us and will make sure that you get fresh bass content every single week.
James, knowing EQ is obviously a really important thing for any bass player. But the other thing to understand is your bass amp is going to sound completely different in different environments. So do you have any experience or any stories about an environment that you've played in where it sounded terrible?
I've been in so many different environments playing the bass, and the thing that has always struck me is 9 times out of 10 a bass guitar or any bit of gear sounds amazing in the music shop. Then when you get it out on a gig, it can slightly be underwhelming, and I've had those moments of going, have I bought a dud, have I not? But the reality is that any bass guitar, the best bass guitar in the world, I mean, I'm talking a 20 grand Federa here, can sound terrible in the wrong room. So understanding how to use equalization is the way to combat different room scenarios.
One of the times that I've found that I've needed to utilize my EQ is if I've been playing bass on a hollow stage. Essentially, when you put a bass amp on a hollow stage, it will act like a massive bass box and it will emphasize all of the rumble, all of the real low ends. And that's the kind of thing that can go right through you and be really unpleasant for the audience.
And also it's where you start losing definition and it makes it very difficult to hear what you're playing. So that's why it's really important to know how to combat that. So Toby, what are some of the things that you've done to combat that sort of thing when you've got that rumbly, big, out of control, undefined bass sound when you're live?
For sure. So if we turn to this wonderful angular bass head here, you can see we've got the EQ on these 4 dials. So we've got a gain and we've got a drive. And we're going to ignore those for now and just focus on this EQ. We've got a mid-level, a mid-frequency, so they're kind of tied into each other. And we've got a bass and we've got a treble. One of the things I always do whenever I'm playing in a new venue is I will have my EQs at 12 o'clock. I will then adjust from there. If I'm playing on a massive hollow stage, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this bass down. Because I already know it's going to sound so bassy and muddy. I can take this bass down a fair bit and that's going to boost the clarity and stop any of those really nasty brown noise rumbles coming through and causing all sorts of trouble with your audience. Another thing that I've bought today for this lesson, James, is I've bought my bass EQ pedal, which we can see on the camera here.
So the bass equalization pedal is basically another version of what you'll find on the vast majority of amplifiers. So it's a great way to visually see what's going on. So Toby, I'm wondering if you can demonstrate some of the basics of EQ for us today.
Sure, and the thing that I really like about this bass equalizer is it's a graphic equalizer. That means that I can pull or I can push up individual frequencies, giving me much more accuracy when I'm EQing my tone.
So you've got the Boss bass equalizer pedal with you today, which has 7 bands which you can boost or cut on it. So it actually has much more control than the Angular head or typical bass guitar amps with knobs on, and also gives us a much more graphical representation, so it's easier for you guys to see. So Toby, what's the first thing that you do if you found you had a really rumbly, out of control bass sound that just felt horrible? What would you do?
The first thing that I would do is I would adjust that dial on the far left, that bassiest dial, and I would take that down. Just because we're playing bass guitar, we can reduce the bass and it's still going to sound great.
Can you give us a demonstration?
So this is with the bass EQ off, and there's no EQ at all. And this is the bass with that 50 hertz lowered. Did you hear any difference?
It's subtle, but it might be enough just to make a difference when you're in a really rumbly room. Now let's put yourself in the situation, say you're lacking clarity in your bass sound. You're actually struggling to hear the individual notes. What would you do?
There are two things that I would do in this situation. The first thing would be is I would reduce around 200 hertz.
Why would you choose 200 hertz?
This is the area of the audio spectrum where muddiness can occur. So we want to reduce that muddiness, get rid of that, and so the frequencies above it are going to cut through a lot more and make it sound a lot clearer.
So that's the first adjustment, reducing 200 hertz. What's the second adjustment you'd make?
If I wanted to cut through more without turning myself up, I'm going to boost 800 hertz.
So can you play us the bass guitar flat as it is?
Of course. So here is the bass again, completely flat with no EQ. And here is the same bass line with a dip at around 200 hertz and an 800 hertz boost.
Oh yeah, it's much more punchy and much more in your face, isn't it?
It's got that growl, hasn't it?
Which in isolation may not be everybody's favourite tone when you're listening to this at home, but actually when you're trying to compensate for room acoustics, this is a really valuable piece of knowledge, which I use all of the time if I'm struggling.
James, there's one more tip that I can give everyone for playing live, and that's if you are playing in a room with an awful lot of glass.
And this does happen. I have done many a gig in an orangery for a wedding or something like that, which was never designed for live music. It was designed for growing plants. So music isn't best placed there. So what do you do to combat that kind of really hard walls that you find in those sorts of venues?
One of the things to realise is when you're playing in a room with a lot of hard surfaces, is the waveforms that are going to come out of this speaker are going to bounce on that hard surface and come back at you. And then they're going to bounce on all these other hard surfaces and they're going to come back at you, meaning that you're going to get this very distorted, almost reverby sound coming back rather than the pure tone. So the best way to stop this from happening is, unfortunately, to turn down. Yeah, I understand that it's quite counterintuitive, but by turning down, you're effectively making these waveforms less powerful. So they're not bouncing around so much and they're not causing all of this interference crashing into each other. I'll tell you what the most difficult thing though is convincing the guitarist to turn down.
I can absolutely believe that. It's totally counterintuitive, but it does work. If you want to get more clarity in a difficult venue, get everybody to play quieter. It does really work. You lose some of that power, you lose some of that excitement, but it can really help you play better music.
So James, another thing that I love to do when I'm playing live is I want to point this speaker towards my head. I don't want to be hearing any of those reflections coming back because it's going to give me a distorted view of what my tone is like. So I will do things like, if I'm playing in a pub, I'll find a bar stool and I'll balance this on the bar stool or find a chair or something like that. I know you had quite an interesting gadget for this as well.
Yeah, Smart Bass used to make this triangular contraption that you could lean your cabinet or combo back on so you could fire the sound up towards your ears. I've seen so many players on gigs where they have their amp directly on the floor, they stand right in front of it, so the sound is effectively going through their legs and they start to lack clarity. So what I like to do is I like to get my amp up off the floor. I use this rig here live and I love this one because I have a speaker on the floor which is creating that bass rumble, which is really nice, and then I have this one here for definition. Now here's the thing, if I find myself in a difficult venue, one of the things I will often do is actually simply unplug the bottom speaker so it acts as a stand, and this is doing the majority of the work.
I've got the same setup. I have two 2x10 cabs and I stack them up lengthways on top of each other to get the maximum amount of height, because I really want to hear what's going on behind me. I don't just want flappy trousers and those bass frequencies coming through flapping my trousers. I want to be hit in the back of the head with bass. So James, another thing to consider when playing live is what other instruments you're playing with, and more importantly, how many other instruments you're playing with. Now, I know yourself, you have played with some very, very big bands. You've played with lots and lots of instruments all around you. So how did you combat this?
So the more instruments you have in a band, the more noise that you have going on, so the more different frequencies going on, and the more instruments you're bound to have working in your frequency range. So sometimes you may have two piano players which could have a left hand going on here. Now here is the trick here. With your monitoring, with what you're hearing around you, if you're using in-ear monitors or you're using floor monitors, is just to have the most important instruments with the most important information in there. That can really, really clean up your mix. You may not need that second keyboard player blasting away. You may not need all of the backing vocals in there, but choose the most important instruments. Typically, that will be the drums, the main keyboard player, the guitarist, and that will give you the foundation, and then some vocals in there if you've got singers, so you know where you are. Again, with this, less is more if you are struggling to hear, going back to what we were saying earlier.
I have to say, for myself, when I'm playing with smaller bands, a lot of the time I'll just play in a 3-piece or a 4-piece. I like to sit my bass underneath everything. So what I will do with my EQ is I'll roll off the treble and maybe even roll down the mid and keep the bass quite high. So I'm sitting underneath everything else and I don't clash with any guitarist or any vocals coming in.
Great top tip there. So guys, we're at the end of today's video. I hope you found it interesting and engaging, finding our different tips that we've found for us working over the years. We'd love to find out what's worked for you. How have you got yourself a great bass guitar sound? Do let us know in the comments below.
So we'll wrap it up there, and that's everything for today, guys. James, it's been an absolute pleasure as always.
It's been great fun. We will see you guys next time.